So you stumbled on this video, which means that you yourself must also be strange and unusual, because I too am strange and unusual. Let's talk about Beetlejuice. Hey guys, it's Quana back again with another review. Hope you guys are doing awesome. So as you couldn't tell by this lovely red veil, we are here to discuss 2024's Beetlejuice. And if I say his name too many more times, he's going to appear in my room and snatch me up. Listen, I was so excited to see this movie. I stayed away from the trailer almost the entirety of the run from the time the trailer dropped until now. I tend to consume almost everything that I can about Beetlejuice. I really thoroughly enjoyed the original film. I love the cast. I thought that the magic of the first movie was just so magnificent. First of all, you had Geena Davis. You had me at Geena Davis because she's one of my all-time favorite actresses, and then you paired her with Alec Baldwin and made him look like a himbo, and it was such a cute pairing. And then you threw in who would become one of my absolute faves in the late 80s and early 90s, Winona Ryder, and you gave them this little adopted weird daughter to take care of and protect and befriend, and then you cast them next to Catherine O'Hara. It was just the perfect recipe for perfection. Not to mention, hello, Michael Keaton Douglas. Like, the way he tapped into that character and then went on to be Batman. Who does that? Nobody's doing that. So the first movie was magic, absolutely magical. And if you are a millennial, you kind of know more about the franchise because there was the hit television series, cartoon series in the 90s, the animated tales, which is a little confusing because in that movie, Lydia and Beetlejuice are friends, and they're certainly not friends in the movie. And then, of course, there's the Broadway musical that took the world by storm. And so here we are as Tim Burton is working with the cast of Wednesday, and he is finding new inspiration in his young muse, Jenna Ortega. He decides to rally up the troops back together, and we get Beetlejuice. We have the return of Winona Ryder as Lydia Dietz. We have Catherine O'Hara as her stepmother, Delia Dietz. We have Michael Keaton Douglas reprising his role as Beetlejuice, and then we have Jenna Ortega showing up as Lydia's daughter, Astrid. A couple of other big players in this movie. We have Willem Dafoe. I enjoyed his role in this movie. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Justin Theroux, who, listen, I like Justin, but Justin did not need to be in this movie. We're going to talk about that later as well. And then, of course, somebody is notably absent in the movie. And guess I am talking about Charles Dietz. The actor who played him, you can look him up for yourself. I'm not going to talk too much about it. Has been accused of some not too good behavior, very predatory behavior, and as such did not return. But I love what they did with his character. And listen, let me just give you the details about Beetlejuice. So in this movie, we join back 30 years later with Lydia, who is now a TV host of paranormal television show host, and she still has the power to see the dead because she is strange and unusual and has maintained that gift. But it's not without its hiccups because it has ostracized her from her daughter, Astrid, who pretty much wants nothing to do with her because she's harboring some feelings of resentment that Lydia can't see her father, who has crossed over into the hereafter. We meet back up with them and also Delia as they are mourning the loss of Charles, which, if I'm not mistaken, that is present in the trailer for those of you who have seen the trailer. And I'm going to try to stay away from anything that isn't in the trailer with regards to what few surprises were in the movie. But that is the basic premise. It's Lydia kind of trying to build relationship back with her daughter Astrid. It's them trying to mourn the loss of Charles, and it's of course about Beetlejuice, who hasn't stopped carrying a torch for Lydia and is looking to get back the woman of his dreams. Most, of course, notably absent for me was Geena Davis and Alec Baldwin, which on the one hand, I was trying to excuse it because, of course, they don't look the same and they're deceased. So why would they not look the same if they're deceased? But then we have Michael Keaton Douglas reprising his role as Beetlejuice, and he was noticeably swollen more in the face and definitely looked like he had aged up some. So it's not like he looked like he was plucked out of the 88 film. So I don't know why we couldn't have had Gina Davis in here, but they did find a way to pay homage to the Maitlands, so there is that. So there, we can rejoice in that. A lot of things that were actually very exciting about this movie. It pays homage not only to that original movie, but to a lot of Tim Burton's movies and his styles. You have the use of stop motion animation in here. You have all kinds of Easter eggs to his earlier projects. And I mean, like, almost everything from the 80s is referenced in some way. So Frankenweenie is referenced in here. I picked up on some subtle touches to Edward Scissorhands, some subtle touches to, of course, Batman. A lot of people forget that Tim Burton did Batman, the best Batman, in my opinion, one of the best. Well, you know, Dark Knight, but I digress. And that was really a pleasure to see those little Easter eggs as a fan of the franchise. However, I will say that for me, this particular film felt a lot more bloated. So we have Justin Theroux playing Lydia's fiance in this movie as Rory, and it was a storyline that was wholly unneeded because, in my opinion, it took away so much of time that could have been spent focusing on the Lydia and Astrid character and their relationship. It didn't really lend itself well. And in the same way that the original did have multiple storylines, you had the Maitlands, you had the Dietz, and then you had Beetlejuice, and you had them kind of coming together, but it was really only 3 storylines. This movie felt like it had like 6 storylines going on at the same time. And the storyline that belongs to the Astrid character and how she tackles her relationship with the hereafter and with the loss that she's experienced, that storyline actually worked really well for me. And it's, I don't know if it's ironic that Jenna Ortega had the stronger storyline out of the movie. Really focusing on Lydia and letting her focus in on her relationship with her daughter was the storyline that worked. It definitely 100% didn't need the Rory character. And what I couldn't help but notice was that the way Rory was styled, it was very much giving Otho, as though they were trying to draw back to that character, and it didn't work for me. He just wasn't comical enough, and it took away time that felt noticeably taken away from the main storyline, and I did not like that character. So I'm so sorry to Justin Theroux. Catherine O'Hara was the saving grace of this movie. She was the star. She shined brightest on the screen. I don't know if it's just a spillover from her real life, but you can kind of tell at times when Winona Ryder doesn't feel 100% comfortable or confident in her own skin and her own abilities. I don't know what has happened to her over the years that has led to that, because she was just so captivating and charismatic in her earlier years. And it's been like that for a while, but I will say that on the cast on Stranger Things, you notice it less, and maybe it's just the way that the character is written, but it felt so very noticeable that she felt out of place and out of comfort in her skin in this movie that it literally left Catherine O'Hara shining brighter than everyone else. And to me, even though Dealey was always a comical character, Beetlejuice was always Lydia's story, and so that was a bit disappointing. There are tons of other characters that are paid homage to. Of course, a lot of the original cast has gone on or no longer with us, and so they pay homage to that. One of my favorite characters from the original movie was the character of Juno, the person who is kind of running the show down in the underworld, and she's the one who kind of informs the Maitlands to stay away from Beetlejuice, what a bad character he is. And the character of Willem Dafoe in this movie was definitely meant to take on that role. I really enjoyed his character, but I felt like they could have had his character interact with Beetlejuice in another way. because let's talk about the Monica Bellucci of it all. Monica Bellucci is in here as the character of Dolores. Now, Dolores is briefly referenced in the first movie when Beetlejuice is marrying Lydia and he's talking about his first wife. So it's on the one hand great to get more lore around Beetlejuice, but her part in this movie is so small. It felt like it took up maybe 5 minutes of screen time, but it's dragged throughout the entire movie in a way that feels a little disconcerting, and a way that just didn't feel like it was really necessary. What it felt like is that her character was created to kind of be an homage to all of these women that Tim Burton has created in his worlds, or used and played within his roles. She felt like an amalgamation of the Bride of Frankenstein, Morticia Addams, Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas. Like, she felt like an amalgamation of all these people, and she definitely is giving all of that with her appearance and her look. It was, so I can appreciate that, but it did not feel like it was a strong enough payoff. It didn't feel like there was enough investment in her storyline to make me care or think that she was actually going to come for Beetlejuice and be a true villainous character. It just kind of fell flat for me. And in fact, she ends up not even being the biggest villain in the movie. So it just makes me feel like she was underwritten and they didn't know what to do with her, because let's just talk about it. Beetlejuice is the star. It's Beetlejuice, which means we should be having more Beetlejuice than we got in the first movie, and it felt as though it was about the same amount of screen time. Beetlejuice was the villain in the first movie. Beetlejuice never feels like the villain in this movie, and I think that is, for me, the biggest separation between this movie and the original. Because as much as we love Beetlejuice and he is a trickster, he was the villain in the first movie. It never feels like he's the villain in this movie. It feels like there's like a moment where maybe he's going to be villainous, but then it falls through, and there's so many other villainous characters that he kind of takes a back seat to all of their villainy. And so that made me lose a little bit of the enthusiasm for this movie. I'm trying to really stay away from Astrid's storyline, because I think it is the one storyline that has some mysteriousness about it and some intrigue about it. So I don't want to give too much, but she's involved in what I consider to be the main and most interesting storyline in the entirety of the movie. And I think they could have focused more on that, because the whole idea of like kind of passing the torch from Winona to Jenna, it's been there in the ether for a while now. So why not just lean all the more into it by giving her more to do in this movie, and making Lydia's motivation really feeling like it was Astrid instead of it feeling like it wasn't. There is one spoiler that I am going to give you, but if you don't want any spoilers at all, exit this video. Know that my overall rating for this movie was a B- to a B, mid B, if I'm going to grade it on a curve, just because I walked out of the movie, and I'm going to echo the group that was sitting right in front of me in the movie. When they walked out, they kind of just talked about, it was a movie, and I looked at them and I said yes. And as I exited the movie theater for good, we made eye contact again, and we both kind of just looked at each other and said, it was a movie. And that's kind of how I left feeling about this, that it was a movie. It ticked the boxes that needed to be ticked in order to be a Tim Burton production. But ultimately, was it necessary? Did it do anything for me as a fan? No, but some people are going to love it, and probably the new generation may love this. I'm always going to go back to that original way more than I will go back to this one. I'm going to hold out hope, though. Maybe when I see this again in streaming, I'll love it a little bit more. Because as of right now, I don't see myself wanting to watch this movie again and again. It felt like very Netflixy. And maybe if it was a series, it would have been more enjoyable. I think that I would have enjoyed it more probably if it was a series. But there's one moment that I'm going to give away, and I'm going to spoil a little bit. And it is probably something that you have heard about. It is the Soul Train sequence. Talked about, very famously, Tim Burton has talked about how people like me do not fit his aesthetic. And while that never bothered me personally, because I never felt like I individually needed that, I definitely understand some fans wanting to see themselves replicated in his main characters. I always felt like, okay, well, he has us in there, mostly men, but he has black people in there here and there. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, there was definitely a black actress who was in the original as one of the undead ladies in the waiting room. However, I think he was talking more just about the stories that live in his head. And I don't know. I'm still torn about whether I want to demand that of every artist. But there's a moment where there's a soul train. There's a train to deliver souls to the hereafter. They are no longer going to live in like this state of limbo in the underworld, and it is a literal soul train. I love and hate this because the tongue-in-cheek of it makes so much sense. Soul train, and it's a train of souls, and it is literally probably about 100 Black people on a platform dancing in 70s garb and dancing to disco music, and the pun of it makes so much sense that if the context around those words that he's spoken in the past didn't exist, I would have rejoiced. But as it stands, it very much was giving the, here, Black people, y'all said I didn't include you in my stuff, and here's about 100 of you, so here, take it and like it. But I will say that it was a funny moment, and I can't help but think the Black people were the ones on the platform, so perhaps that's a good thing. They weren't going to disappear. Their souls weren't going to poof up into smoke. It was very noticeable. And there was a lot of music in this movie. So that scene, it kind of worked. It was very comical. I think that is where this movie is living the most. This movie tried to lean more into the comedy and less into the spooky thrills. And the original had a nice even mix. I mean, Beetlejuice in that banister sequence was terrifying when I was younger. There weren't really that many jump scares in this or moments that I wasn't expecting. But listen, those are my thoughts about Beetlejuice. I do hope that you go and see the movie for yourself, especially if you are a fan, because maybe you'll be able to change my mind about it. Maybe I'll watch it again and love it. But let me know in the comments if you've seen it, if you're looking forward to this, and what your thoughts are about Tim Burton and all of the controversy. I will see you again if I see you, if you can see me. Maybe you're strange and unusual as well, and we can see each other. I don't know. Until next time, guys. Toodles.